A legacy isn't something you inherit. It is something you forge through years of struggle, sacrifice, and an unwavering iron will. Watch the epic tales of those who dared to leave their mark on history. Click subscribe now and help us build a lasting legacy together.
They asked me to move to the kids' table. I was 26 years old with a master's degree, a lease in my own name, and a savings account my family had no idea existed. And my mother asked me with a smile to please move to the kids' table so my sister could sit next to my aunt at the adults' dinner. I moved. That's the part I'm most ashamed of looking back. Not that she asked. That I did it without a word. My sister's name is Christy. She's 2 years younger than me, and she has been the sun of our family's solar system for as long as I can remember. Not because she was smarter or kinder, or worked harder. Just because she was louder, prettier in the way my parents noticed, and she cried when she didn't get what she wanted. That was her entire strategy, and it worked every single time. I learned early on to be quiet, to get good grades without anyone making a fuss, to handle my own problems. When I was 12 and I had a terrible teacher who was failing half the class unfairly, I didn't tell my parents. I researched the appeals process, wrote a letter to the school board, and had my grade corrected on my own. My mother found out 2 years later and her response was, "Oh, that's nice, honey." She told the story at a dinner party once, but she got my teacher's name wrong and called it Christy's story by the end. That's just how it was. Christy got the car at 17. I took the bus until I was 22 and bought my own. Christy got a credit card with a $5,000 limit on her parents' account for emergencies. My emergencies were mine to handle. Christy studied abroad in Florence for a semester, and my parents wired her an extra $2,000 for shopping because, as my mother put it, you only do Florence once. I studied abroad the following year, in Edinburgh, and paid for every part of it myself, through scholarships and a weekend job. When I came home, my father said, "Oh right, you did that trip, didn't you?" He genuinely forgot I had been gone. You get used to it. Or you think you do. What you actually do is build a very quiet, very sturdy wall around yourself, and then you start filling the space behind it with something that looks a lot like ambition. I finished my master's in accounting 2 months before Christy finished her undergraduate degree, and when my family threw her a graduation party, I sat in the backyard drinking lemonade and smiling, while everyone toasted her like she'd discovered electricity. Nobody threw me a party. I didn't expect one. That was the worst part. I had genuinely stopped expecting one. I moved to a different city for work that fall, got a job at a mid-sized commercial real estate firm. It wasn't glamorous, and I won't pretend it was easy. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates for the first year, ate a lot of rice and canned beans, and spent my weekends learning every single thing I could about property valuation, market cycles, and financing structures. My boss, an older woman named Ms. Hartley who had the warmth of a spreadsheet and the instincts of a shark, told me in my first performance review that I was the most technically precise junior analyst she'd seen in 15 years, and that I had a chip on my shoulder that was either going to make me exceptional or burn me to the ground. She was right about the chip. She was right about what it could do. I started making real money around year 3, quietly reinvested it, made a few smart moves when the market dipped, got promoted, made a few smarter moves, stayed in the same modest apartment until year 5, even after I could afford better, because I was building something, and I didn't want to slow it down. I talked to my family once a week. The calls followed a predictable shape. My mother would update me on Christy's life for 8 minutes, ask me 1 or 2 surface-level questions, and then remind me to moisturize, and maybe consider coming home for whatever event was approaching. My father was warmer in his own limited way, but he mostly echoed my mother. Christy and I texted occasionally, friendly enough, but with the particular hollowness of 2 people going through the motions of a relationship that neither of them chose. She got engaged when she was 28. He seemed like a decent person, her fiancé. I flew home for the engagement party and watched my parents cry with happiness, in a way that I realized, sitting in the corner with my glass of wine, I had never once made them cry. Not from joy, anyway. "You'll be next," my aunt told me that night, patting my arm in a way that was meant to be comforting. "Maybe," I said. "Don't wait too long," she said. I smiled. I had closed on my second property 3 weeks earlier. A commercial unit in a growing neighborhood, cash and financing hybrid, well below what I knew it was worth. I didn't mention it. There was nobody at that party who would have found it interesting. The wedding was set for a Saturday in June, 18 months away. My mother called me the week after the engagement party to talk about the venue, a converted estate about an hour outside the city, beautiful, genuinely beautiful, and the cost. "We're contributing quite a bit," she told me. "Your father and I, we want it to be perfect for her." "That's generous," I said. "We were hoping you might contribute as well," she said, as her sister. Family. There it was. I want to be clear about something. I have never been petty about money. I have lent money to people I love without expecting it back, and I've never lorded anything over anyone. That is not who I am. But I had also been very, very careful not to let my family know the specifics of my financial situation, because I had watched for 26 years what happened to resources in our family. They flowed in one direction, toward Christy. And the moment anyone suspected I had more than a modest income, I knew what would follow. "How much are you thinking?" I asked. My mother named a number. It wasn't small. "Let me think about it," I said. I sent $500 in a card. My mother called to thank me with a tone that suggested she was managing her disappointment. I let her manage it. The 18 months between the engagement and the wedding were busy ones for me. I won't walk through every detail because the details aren't really the point. The point is the direction. The direction was up, and it kept going up, and I kept my head down and my mouth shut, and I built the kind of stability that nobody in my family knew to look for, because they'd never imagined it was possible for someone like me. The quiet one, the boring one, the one who took the kids' table without complaining. By the time the wedding weekend arrived, I owned 3 properties outright and held significant equity in 2 others. One of them, and this is the part that matters, so stay with me, was the converted estate where my sister's wedding was being held. I had purchased it 8 months earlier. I need to explain how that happened, because I know how it sounds. I had identified the property as an undervalued asset the previous year, when I was doing market research on event venues in that region. The owners were looking to sell quickly due to a family situation of their own, and the price reflected their urgency. I went through a broker, completed due diligence, and closed on it within 60 days. I retained the same management company that had been running it, kept the same bookings calendar, and made exactly 0 changes to the operation. It was a straightforward acquisition. I did not know, at the time of purchase, that my sister's wedding was booked there. I found out approximately 3 months after I closed on the property, when I was reviewing the venue's existing contract list as part of a routine portfolio review. There was Christie's name, the date, the deposit my parents had paid. I sat with that for a long time. The legal situation was uncomplicated. I owned the property, the contract was valid and would be honored regardless of ownership transfer, and there was no ethical obligation to disclose my ownership to the clients. The management company handled all guest-facing communications. My name was nowhere on any correspondence. I could have told them. I thought about it. I genuinely did. I made a pro and con list in my notebook, the way I make pro and con lists for everything, and I stared at it for an hour. And then I closed the notebook and made a decision that I have thought about many times since, and I still believe it was the right one. Not because I wanted to ambush anyone, but because I had spent my entire life being invisible in that family, and I was tired of managing their comfort at the expense of my own quiet truth. I was not going to tell them, not yet. Not on my timeline. My timeline turned out to be the wedding reception. I arrived Friday evening for the rehearsal dinner. Christy looked beautiful, genuinely happy, and for a moment I felt the uncomplicated warmth of being her sister. The version of our relationship that might have existed in a different family, where we'd actually been allowed to know each other. I hugged her. I meant it. My mother pulled me aside during cocktail hour to ask, very politely, whether I'd thought more about contributing to the florist's final invoice. They went a little over budget, she said. When did that become my budget? I asked. She laughed like I'd made a small joke and moved on. I found the estate manager, a professional and composed woman named Ms. Dunbar, near the end of the evening. She knew who I was, of course. We'd corresponded over email about a few facility updates. She greeted me quietly, with the particular discretion of someone who understands exactly how to navigate a delicate situation. Everything looks beautiful, I told her. Your family has excellent taste, she said. And then, carefully, Mrs. Dunbar, sorry. You know what I mean, it's a lovely event. It is, I agreed. The wedding was Saturday afternoon. I wore a dark green dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, and I sat in the 3rd row with my aunt and my cousin, and I watched my sister walk down an aisle in a building I owned, and I felt something I don't have a perfect word for. Not triumph. Not quite. Something quieter than that. Something like completion. The reception was held in the main hall. Dinner, speeches, the whole evening ahead of us. My brother-in-law's best man gave a toast. My mother gave a toast. Christy cried. The happy kind this time. My father, who cries at nothing, wiped his eyes with a cocktail napkin, and my heart twisted a little because I love my father, even when I don't understand him. Then Christy's new mother-in-law leaned across the table and asked me what I did for work. Real estate investment, I said. Oh, how interesting. Commercial or residential? Both. Mostly commercial. Are you local to this area or? I have properties in a few regions, I said. Christy was watching this conversation from across the table with the mild, unfocused attention of someone not particularly interested in the answer. My mother was speaking to someone on her right and not listening. Actually, my new mother-in-law said, looking around the hall with admiration, this venue is just stunning. Do you know who owns it? We tried to look it up because my husband was curious about the history of the building. The table went quiet in that small, accidental way that tables sometimes do. I took a sip of my water. I do, I said. My mother turned from her conversation. You know who owns it? Christy said. I own it, I said. I purchased it last year. The silence that followed had a texture to it. I've thought about how to describe it, and the best I can do is, it was the silence of a story, suddenly making sense. Like when you're reading a book and you flip back 3 chapters because you missed something, and now the whole thing shifts. Christy's expression moved through several stages. Confusion first, then a strange kind of calculation, then something that I can only describe as the look of someone realizing, for the first time, that a person they had never fully seen had been somewhere unexpected this whole time. You own this building, she said. I do. Since when? About 8 months ago. My mother set down her fork, not dramatically. She just set it down, very carefully, and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger. Not exactly. It was closer to reassessment. Like she was running back through a very long film and noticing all the scenes she'd misunderstood. Why didn't you tell us? She asked. You didn't ask, I said. You never really asked. That landed. I didn't say it to wound her, or maybe I did, a little, the way you sometimes speak a true thing you've been holding for years and can't quite keep inside anymore. But I said it quietly, without heat, and I think that's why it worked the way it did. My aunt, who has always been the most perceptive person in our family and the only one who ever asked me real questions at holidays, said, How many properties do you own? A few, I said. She laughed, not unkindly. It was a laugh of genuine surprise and something close to delight. The conversation found its footing again after a few minutes. The way conversations do at weddings. Because the machinery of the event keeps moving, whether or not you've just had your understanding of your own family quietly reorganized. Music started. Someone brought out a second round of champagne. Christy came and found me by the dessert table an hour later. She was holding her dress up with one hand and her glass in the other, and she looked, I want to be precise here, she looked uncertain. Which was not a look I was used to seeing on her face. I didn't know, she said. I know you didn't, did you know, when you came to the engagement party? No, I said. I found out after, from a contracts review. She was quiet for a moment. That's insane. A little bit, I agreed. Are you angry? At us? I thought about the kids' table, the Edinburgh trip nobody remembered, the graduation party that never happened, the phone calls about her life for 8 minutes before the obligatory question about mine. I'm not angry, I said. I'm here. I've been here this whole time, you just weren't looking. She didn't say anything to that. She didn't have an answer, and I respected her enough not to fill the silence for her. Later that night, when most of the guests had filtered toward the bar or the dance floor, my father found me standing near the window at the edge of the hall, looking out at the gardens. The outdoor lights were on, and the roses were blooming, and it was genuinely beautiful, this building, this property I had found and purchased and quietly folded into the structure of my life. I owe you an apology, he said, without preamble. I looked at him. I don't know exactly what for, he continued. That's the problem. I don't know what I missed or when I missed it or how long it's been going on, but I can feel that it's been a lot, and I'm sorry. My father is not an eloquent man. That was, by some margin, the most precise thing I had ever heard him say. Thank you, I told him, and I meant it. He put his hand on my shoulder briefly. The paternal gesture of a man who doesn't know how to hug. And then he walked back toward the bar, and I turned back to the window. The estate manager came by a few minutes later to check whether I needed anything. Wonderful evening, she said quietly. It really was, I said. I stayed until the end. Helped my mother gather the card box and the leftover programs. Hugged Christy and her new husband outside while the car waited. My mother held my hand a second longer than usual when we said goodnight. And didn't say anything. And I understood that as its own kind of beginning. Driving back to my hotel, I thought about what someone once wrote in a letter to me. A mentor from graduate school. A woman who built her own firm from nothing and had a framed quote behind her desk that I've carried with me ever since. The ones who learn to be invisible are usually the ones who learn to see everything else clearly. I don't tell this story to make my family look bad. They loved me in the ways they knew how to love me, which were limited ways, but they were also not terrible ways. My mother is not a villain. My father is a decent man. Christy is a person who was handed a distorted mirror her whole life and shown a reflection that did her no real favors, and she's going to have to find her way to something more honest on her own terms. I tell this story because of the kids' table. Because I think about how many of us move to the kids' table without a word. How many of us learn to handle our own appeals processes at 12. Our own Edinburgh trips. Our own silent inventory of every time we were looked through instead of at. And how many of us built something extraordinary in that invisible space, not because someone believed in us, but because we got very, very clear on what we were capable of when no one was watching. They don't see you now. Give it time. They'll see you when you're the one who owns the building.